André Daniels joins us on the line, head of tax controversy and dispute regulations at Tax Consulting SA. Andre, such a serious topic. What are you trying to inform us about this morning? Good morning.
Good morning, Wasanga, to you and your listeners. I hope you're all well. We just at Tax Consulting wanted to warn taxpayers that if they have any non-declarations in their past, they now need to come clean, so to speak, with SARS and declare same through the Voluntary Disclosure Programme.
How far back do you go, really? This voluntary disclosure, how far is it and what do we declare? Let's just assume that our listeners have been innocently unaware.
Yes, and we do note at Tax Consulting that many of our clients are actually innocently unaware until we perform a tax diagnostic to confirm the tax position. To answer your question, Wasanga, we do need to go back as far as possible and as far as the non-compliance relates to. Either clients go back to the 1980s, the 1990s in terms of a rental property that they've been renting out and incurring rental income, but they haven't paid the tax thereon.
Crikey. All right. And it almost it's a scary fact and we're looking at the change particularly and the shift in SARS's approach towards taxpayers who do not accurately declare, which can lead to arrests and prosecutions. Now, this is really frightening. We don't want to see our neighbors, being arrested for what we'd call white collar crime. But what factors have driven this change?
Most definitely. And what's driven this change is we've seen SARS certainly setting out their strategic objectives as set out by Commissioner Keith Sweater, and their strategic objective and drive towards voluntary compliance, making voluntary compliance easy and cost effective, while at the same time making non-compliance difficult and costly. Another factor is the SARS collection drive. As I'm sure you can understand, the fiscus is under immense pressure due to economic downturn and the shrinking of the tax base as a whole.
Yeah, and the press release discusses the importance of accurate tax returns, especially during the ongoing tax season. Can you share some tips for taxpayers to ensure they file their returns correctly and avoid potential issues? I think this is something that is fundamental and should be taught from primary school, even high school.
Most definitely. We often have the chat, in the office at Tax Consulting that, tax should actually be a subject that's offered at a school level just to ensure that everyone is aware of their obligations. But to answer your question, we need to ensure that you have all supporting documentation when you file your return, as SARS may put you through a process known as verification, where they verify all of your declarations and ensure the accuracy thereof. Where a taxpayer's returns are complex, I do please implore taxpayers to appoint a tax practitioner or a tax professional to assist the taxpayer in ensuring the accuracy of their return and to avoid any potential issues with SARS.
And you mentioned the Voluntary Disclosure Programme as a lifeline for taxpayers with undisclosed tax default. Could you explain how the VDP works and what criteria taxpayers need to meet to qualify for it?
Certainly. The Voluntary Disclosure Programme, more commonly known as the VDP, is a program which allows taxpayers to voluntarily come forward to disclose their tax defaults. There are requirements which are encapsulated in the Tax Administration Act, and more specifically as per Section 227 of the Tax Administration Act. For a valid VDP application, a taxpayer must ensure that a disclosure is voluntary in the first instance. It must involve a default which has not occurred within 5 years of the disclosure of a similar default. It must be full and complete in all material respects. It must involve a behavior referred to in a column of the penalty percentage table. It must not result in a refund due by SARS, and it must be made in a prescribed form and manner. I understand that this is quite a mouthful, and that's why we certainly, advise taxpayers that you should engage with a tax professional and specifically a tax attorney when engaging SARS, and more specifically engaging SARS with the VDP.
Yeah, and of course, it's really, you've explained it in the best way possible, and it almost seems like a trick. There's that trust deficit when it comes to our government. We're really squeezed as citizens, but at the end of the day, we need to be responsible citizens. We need to be able to be above the standards that are required for us to participate. And I think you've given us the various tools. You mentioned the tax diagnostic, which needs to be done. Outside of that, what key takeaways may some of our listeners take? If you've just joined in, we are in the tail end of our discussion with André Daniels, Head of Tax Controversy and Dispute Resolution at Tax Consulting SA. So Hawks and SARS are on the hunt, and you've explained quite well the Voluntary Disclosure Programme. Just as a last parting shot for our listeners who may have caught the tail end of this discussion, what are some key takeouts of this? What should our listeners really be focusing on, if anything, out of this discussion?
So what the listeners need to take heed of is the warning that SARS are coming for you if you have not accurately declared anything in your tax returns, if you have not actively engaged and accurately declared to SARS. They are coming for you. We can see, as per the press release, that a 54-year-old medical doctor from the Eastern Cape was arrested for numerous charges of tax fraud. Often there's the misalignment or the misthinking that SARS really only go after, the big bad guys, the so-called tenderpreneurs and all that sort of stuff. But they've even gone so far as to go after a medical doctor, someone that's really esteemed in society, as I'm sure you can understand. So this really encapsulates for us at Tax Consulting that if you haven't declared anything and you don't make use of the VDP, SARS are coming for you. Importantly, Wasanga, the VDP only remains available where you approach SARS before they approach you.
Yeah, thank you so much once again for that discussion. André Daniels, Hawks, the Head of Tax Controversy and Dispute Resolution at Tax Consulting SA. With Hawks and SARS on the hunt, the VDP could be your tax redemption savior. Thank you so much once again for your time, André. All the best.